This sample is going to show you how you can pink the edge of fabric with pinking shears in order to make sure that it doesn't fray past a certain point. There are a couple of different ways that you can do this, but one way that you can do this is you can start by pinking the fabric. Obviously, if you were doing this with a garment, you would be pinking the individual edges, but for the sake of this sample, you can go ahead and just cut them in half with the pinking shears. Next, you're going to go to the sewing machine and getting about 1/8 of an inch away or 1/4 of an inch away from the edge of the fabric, you're going to begin with a back stitch, stitch all the way down the edge of your sample, and then end with the back stitch. Now, if you were doing this in another way, what you could do is first do this stitch and then go back in and pink the fabric close to the edge of the stitch. Once you've done the first side of the sample, you can do the other side, remembering to begin and end with the back stitch. Keep in mind that every time you sew a seam, you should make sure that you're clipping your threads, and your thread should be as clipped as close to the edge of the fabric as possible. Once you've clipped your threads, lay both of the pieces of fabric together with the right sides touching. And then you are going to stitch whatever your seam allowance might be for the real garment. In this case, we're going to be using a 1/2 inch seam allowance. You're going to begin and end the sample with a back stitch. Clip all of your threads, and then you can go ahead and head over to the iron. Next, you're going to open up your fabric on the seam, and we're going to press this seam open. I always like to press all of my seams first on the inside of the garment, and then I flip it over on the outside of the garment to make sure there aren't any unusual tucks. Now you might notice that the stitch is quite a ways away from the pinked edge. This is fine in some circumstances, but in other cases, you would want the pinked edge to go right up against where that stitch is. And that way the fabric can only fray up to where the stitch line is, and the pinked edge will help protect the fabric from fraying. So if you'd like to do the sample this way, where you first stitch and then pink, that is an absolutely wonderful and acceptable way of doing this sample. You've now completed your pinked edge.